Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we examine the region's biggest stories with the leaders shaping them. I am Katie Jensen. On this episode, we speak with Nadim Shehadi, economist, political advisor and one of the leading voices on Lebanese and Middle Eastern affairs. A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon was announced earlier this week, but after Hezbollah rejected the deal, can it survive? Or is it already beginning to unravel? Mr. Shehadi, thank you for joining us and great to have you back on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you.
Well, Hezbollah has rejected the latest ceasefire proposal we saw announced earlier this week. Frankly speaking, does that effectively end any realistic prospect of peace in Lebanon? Or do you think there's still a pathway forward?
There certainly is a pathway forward. What Hezbollah is doing, it's trying to assert itself as an interlocutor. As Hezbollah is not opposed to the negotiations with Israel. It wants to be the interlocutor and it wants Iran to be the decision maker for Lebanon. And that's the kind of game that's being played between the Lebanese government and Tehran and Hezbollah and the US declarations. So the mechanism of the negotiations are as important as the negotiations themselves and as important as the substance. Who talks to whom about what? And Hezbollah has negotiated with Israel many times before. The 2000 withdrawal of Israel was negotiated directly with Hezbollah, and the same as the exchange of prisoners. So it's not a question of being opposed to negotiations in the absolute sense.
And I think you make an interesting point there because, of course, Hezbollah was not invited to the negotiating table this time. We've seen their leader come out this week, call the negotiations futile and humiliating for Lebanon. Now, Hezbollah insists its decisions are made in Lebanon's national interest. But I have to wonder how much of its position is genuinely Lebanese and how much is driven by Iran's regional calculations. Do you think Hezbollah has become a bargaining chip in a much larger geopolitical contest?
It hasn't. It's always been an arm of Iran. What's happened, after October 7, what became obvious is that there's a regional war led by Iran against the United States. This became obvious after October 7 because of the sequence. It started in Gaza, then Lebanon, then Iraq, then Yemen, then Iran itself. So it looked like a regional war, and it's being treated as a regional war. So the Iranians have, in a way, been the wise warrior that avoids having the battle in its own territory. For the last 40 years, it's fought the United States everywhere else except Iran itself. But this time, it's brought the battle home. So that's one of the main changes. It's now become a direct confrontation with Iran and proxies rather than just a problem in Lebanon or a problem in Gaza or something happening in Iraq. Or if you remember in 2015, there were experts in DC saying that the Houthis have nothing to do with Iran. The Houthis are their own thing, but now nobody can say that anymore after what happened, after the rockets were coordinated. So that's I think is the main new factor, and that it's a regional war involving everyone, including the Gulf states, of course.
Okay, well, let's talk specifically about this deal because, of course, the ceasefire that was agreed earlier this week was still early stages. There were more talks scheduled for June 22nd for a more comprehensive next step. But when we look at the current ceasefire, if Hezbollah refuses to comply with the ceasefire terms we've seen this week, does the Lebanese state have the authority and, more importantly, the political will to actually enforce its sovereignty? Could the Lebanese armed forces ever be asked to confront Hezbollah directly?
No. The direct answer is that there is no internal military solution to Hezbollah involving fighting Hezbollah. If Israel could not get rid of Hamas in 2 years of fighting in Gaza, the Lebanese armed forces will certainly not be able to get rid of or disarm Hezbollah by force in Lebanon. But that's not the way it happens in Lebanon. In Lebanon, what you need to do is separate the tracks. There has to be 2 parallel tracks. One of them is between the Lebanese state and Israel, state-to-state negotiations, as they happened. The last time they happened was in 1983, in the 17th of May 1983 agreement between the Lebanese state and Israel. And then there has to be a completely separate track between the Lebanese state and Hezbollah and internal negotiations with Hezbollah and the Shia community to include it in the Taif agreement. You cannot mix both. And that's one of the problems with the current mechanism as it was based on Security Council Resolution 1701. The Lebanese state was, in a way, implementing an agreement that it did not negotiate itself, the Lebanese government. For a war it did not fight, and with conditions it cannot fulfill, which is the disarming of Hezbollah. So there has to be these 2 parallel tracks which enforce each other. So an advance on one will strengthen the other track. So if in the Lebanese Israeli track there is an agreement for Israel, a commitment for Israel to withdraw and for the people of South Lebanon to go back to their villages and rebuild their lives, this will strengthen the internal Lebanese track with Hezbollah, and which involves the villagers themselves. They will see it as their interest that that track is successful. And in the same way, if there is advance in the Lebanese internal track, it will strengthen the Lebanese-Israeli track because Hezbollah will be more likely to give up its arms and join the Lebanese consensus under the Taif agreement.
And I think that's one of the big challenges. I mean, we've seen Joseph Aoun, take part in a lot of these ceasefire discussions and negotiations in recent weeks, but it's whether the government really has the power to enact that change. We know Lebanon's institutions are fragile. We know its economy remains in absolute turmoil, crisis. If tensions escalate, can Beirut actually manage the situation alone, or will it require significant foreign assistance in order to be able to maintain any kind of stability?
Forget about the word alone. This is a regional war with a regional confrontation which involves every single state in the region. There is no such thing as Lebanon being alone. And Lebanon is not alone. Lebanon is in Washington with full support from the United States administration.
Well, I would think a lot of people within Lebanon do feel alone. I mean, we look at how many people have been displaced as well, the huge turmoil. I think there's big questions now what it means for refugees. So I would argue that, potentially a lot of people within Lebanon do feel like they have been left alone.
That was the problem in the last few years, that Lebanon was left alone. What I'm saying is that Lebanon cannot be left alone to handle this anymore, because it is, since October 7, it's now obvious that this involves the whole region, that no state in the region can dissociate itself, however much they try, or they can dissociate themselves from this confrontation with Iran that's holding the whole region hostage.
And of course, I think one of the other big issues we see is that Hezbollah has obviously involved itself in this war without the true backing of the Lebanese state as well. We know Hezbollah built its legitimacy on the idea of resistance and the liberation of southern Lebanon. But today, many of the same communities it once claimed to protect have been devastated by war. Do you think Hezbollah has become really trapped by the very narrative that originally made it so popular?
Well, absolutely. What you're stating is the key issue. Hezbollah has hegemony over the population of South Lebanon because of that narrative that it is a resistance, protecting them from Israeli aggression and all that. But what this last war has shown is that Hezbollah is neither protection nor is it nor is it preventing any attacks. It's not a barrier to attacks. Israel doesn't see Hezbollah as a threat, enough of a threat not to attack. And Hezbollah has been defeated. I mean, it has a major defeat. It doesn't admit it, but there's been too many casualties of Hezbollah fighters. And the most important thing, I mean, if you think of the relationship between Hezbollah and the community, especially the Shia community, Hezbollah drove the young men of the Shia community to fight in Syria. There's been 3,000 young Shiites, Hezbollah fighters who died in Syria for nothing, because now the regime has fallen. So all these factors are part of the relationship between Hezbollah and the community, and the community has to, in a way, overcome this hegemony and this narrative, and it's the only weak point that Hezbollah has. It's for the community to reject Hezbollah's narrative and to want to join the rest of Lebanon in the Taif agreement and have peace.
And I want to ask you about those communities in a little bit more detail, because as we know, close to 1 million people have been displaced. Now, we've seen entire villages that have been destroyed. Schools and public buildings have also become temporary shelters. So I wonder, beyond the politics of war and peace, what do you see as a realistic plan for these families?
Well, that's at the core of what's happening. Those who have been displaced are, in a way, the constituency that Hezbollah has hegemony over through that narrative of protection, of resistance, of being in a way taking care of the community, which has been, which they say has been neglected by the state. So this kind of narrative collapses when Hezbollah launches a war without consultation for no apparent Lebanese reason, and this war leads to the destruction and displacement and destitution of the people that Hezbollah is supposed to serve. So all these factors play into the, if you like, the defeat of Hezbollah politically, because Hezbollah, I mean, you know, the thing about Hezbollah and all the IRGC forces, including Iran, is that as long as they can throw one rocket, they consider that they've won. Because they can hold the whole of the GCC hostage by being able to throw one single volley of missiles and hit the infrastructure or the cities or the oil stations. So as long as it can, because it's the blackmailer, as long as it can do it once, it can do one, then it will hold the whole region hostage. So Hezbollah is the same. Hezbollah, as long you can defeat Hezbollah, destroy 90% of its infrastructure and missiles, but as long as they can throw half a dozen at Israel, they can ignite a war.
Do you think we're getting closer to that now?
Well, it's complicated, and whatever happens in Washington and whatever happens in Lebanon affects that goal, whether we're getting closer or not. And the mechanism of discussion of the negotiations is key, because what you want to avoid is a situation where the Lebanese state is seen to be in collaboration with the Israelis who are destroying South Lebanon in order to defeat Hezbollah.
And do you think that's a real risk as we see today? Because we saw Hezbollah come out earlier and say until the occupation of southern Lebanon ends, they said the attacks will continue. So do you see that? You're saying that is a real risk today?
Hezbollah can say anything it likes.
Sure.
What matters is whether people believe it. And what matters, people will believe it or not believe it, depending on what happens in the region, what the Lebanese state is doing. If the Lebanese state can promise through the negotiations in Washington, with the support of the United States and the support of the Arab states, if it can promise that Israel will withdraw, and Israel has said that it has no ambition in South Lebanon. So if you can tell the people of South Lebanon that through these negotiations, Israel will withdraw and they can go back home as long as Hezbollah will disarm and stop throwing rockets and involving them in wars, then that's the key factor.
And that's a big sticking point.
Defeat Hezbollah.
And that's the thing. I feel like we're still not there, unfortunately.
It's the only sticking point because there is no military solution to a resistance movement like Hezbollah.
Oh, absolutely.
That will thrive on being fought.
Absolutely. And we've seen what's happened before with internal civil war and other things when the LAF have tried to take on Hezbollah as well. So I completely agree with you. I guess, where do we go from here? Because as we know, Lebanon will require billions of dollars for reconstruction. Now, earlier you said Lebanon will not be left alone, as you say it's happened in the past. But I have to wonder, with the region frankly preoccupied by wider tensions involving Iran and its proxies. We mentioned some of the attacks earlier. We've seen Kuwait targeted this week, UAE, Saudi previously as well. So I have to question, where will that funding actually come from? Who is prepared to be able to invest in rebuilding Lebanon today?
Frankly speaking, let me throw that at you. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
What matters is that the solution is seen as regional.
But where's it going to come from?
This is part of a regional fight. I mean, it may not come. It may not come as like people expect it to, and that's fine, as long as we have peace and we're moving towards people going back to their villages and rebuilding their lives. Some damage is permanent.
Okay.
It's. Now, I consider that supporting Lebanon with that is important regionally, because the example of the Lebanese system, the coexistence that Lebanon represents, is a model that is useful for places like Syria, like Iraq, even like the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. What you have in Lebanon are people who can live with their own contradictions and recognize their own contradictions and tolerate their own contradictions. But you have an organization, which is Hezbollah, that has abused of that and that has taken over. In the same way, in a way, as the PLO had abused that system in the 70s. The PLO was received in Lebanon. The freedom that Lebanon provided for the PLO consolidated it as an institution, gave it international dimensions, and they built their institutions in Lebanon.
Okay, well let me ask you about the system then.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your thoughts on the system as it stands today. We've seen, President Joseph Aoun, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, they obviously came to office with significant expectations. We saw that real hold on any kind of political power for such an extended period. Tell me, how would you assess their performance so far? Do you think they've shown the leadership actually needed during this crisis?
You see, I don't think we should judge them on these as personal leadership, because the challenge is too huge to hold any politician. It's not a question of personality or leadership. What happened was they came in exceptional circumstances.
Sure, but how do you think they've gone with those exceptional circumstances?
But let me tell you what the exceptional circumstances were. It was the collapse of the Syrian regime, which is a major change in the region, a major blow to Hezbollah, a major blow to Iran as well, and to the whole axis of resistance. So, and they've taken very bold moves and very important policies that were unprecedented before in challenging Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, even though it makes, declarations and all this sort of posturing, are still part of the government.
Sure, but I would also say that in times of
serious.
peace, it's easy to lead during times of peace. I think it's times of change and volatility. That's when the real leaders stand up. So I take your point. Certainly the regime change in Syria has had a huge rippling effect, not only on Lebanon, the entire region, but in terms of how we judge their leadership in these rather extraordinary circumstances. How would you assess them?
Well, we have the most qualified government probably in the history of humanity. If you think that we have 24 ministers, 14 of them have PhDs, including the Prime Minister, and you don't have. I mean, I think in the history of England, there's only been one Prime Minister that I know of that had a PhD. So,
and I think Australia is fairly
in terms
similar.
of qualification, in terms of in terms of honesty, in terms of transparency, qualifications, goodwill, we have the best possible combination of
so certainly
of government and
high praise
president, but they need support.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of that support then, not to jump ahead, but let's talk about some of the regional support, because we've seen reports suggesting Saudi Arabia has been quietly working behind the scenes to be able to strengthen ties between Washington and Beirut. What kind of role do you think Riyadh is playing behind the scenes? What do you know of? And do you think Saudi diplomacy can help secure lasting guarantees for Lebanon's future?
Okay, let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase the word support.
Okay.
What Saudi is doing and what should be done is, it's not a matter of support for Lebanon. It's a matter of looking at the problem on a regional scale, where the solution for Lebanon is part of the solution for the whole region. And that leaving Lebanon on its own makes the regional situation worse, because of Hezbollah being the front line of Iran. You've seen that the Iraqi militias have been lying very low. They haven't, and it's the same with the Houthis recently. It's only Hezbollah that's challenging the whole system, the whole negotiations, and the Iranians are using Hezbollah as a pawn. They're sort of pretending that they will not sign any agreement as long as there is no peace in Lebanon. But I mean, nobody believes that in a way. It's just posturing.
Yep.
So it's instead of looking at it as support for Lebanon, you should look at it as a comprehensive view of the regional issue in which Lebanon is a key player and a key factor in the solution.
Okay, well, let me get your thoughts on the Israeli side of things, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has welcomed recent moves in Washington that could reduce political constraints on US support for Israel. Now, of course, critics have argued that giving Israel broader backing without meaningful conditions does risk emboldening more aggressive military action right across the region. Is that something that concerns you as well, or do you actually think that stronger US support could help deter a wider conflict?
Definitely. I think,
Okay.
well, instead of stronger, I would call it consistent US support. I think every leader in the region and every analyst is worried about American continuity of support. The United States has in a way capitulated several times in front of Iran. The first time was in 1983, when after the Marine barracks bombing and the American embassy bombing in Lebanon, which was a confrontation between Iran and the United States in Lebanon, President Reagan decided to pack up and leave. So that was capitulation towards Iran, and that led to Syrian control, the growth of Hezbollah, and all that. So it was there are consequences to this, so the United States capitulated again, of course, in after the Iraq War, with the withdrawal from Iraq, and with allowing Iran and Russia to destroy Syria and maintain Assad in power. That was on America's watch, and that's what worries us, that the United States can change and is not consistent.
And I think that's one of the big
regime
concerns.
change in Washington,
Absolutely.
which should have before Tehran.
Absolutely, and I think you're spot on when it comes to the change in administration. We have seen different approaches from Washington, certainly very different approaches from President Trump compared to the Biden administration. The conflict we're seeing right now today between Israel and Iran, that the US has obviously played a key role in negotiating, but obviously that war has transformed the entire regional landscape. Now, what's your assessment of the war so far? How concerned do you think the world should be about the possibility of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz? We know President Trump has been talking a lot about reopening the strait that frankly was open before the war began.
Yes. No, forget about all this. All this is Washington political analysis. It's driven by whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'm very disappointed with the analysis you get from the mainstream media and in America. If you read, there was an article today saying that that Iran has won the war and that they have a strategy which was successful and all that. That's not true. Iran has lost a lot in this war. Iran had made major mistakes. The first mistake was to bring the war to its own home. The second was to misread its enemy. You see, there's The Art of War by Chinese general Sun Tzu. The wise warrior knows his enemy and hits the enemy where it's weak.
Well, one would argue Iran has done exactly that. I take your point in many respects. Iran has been affected, but we've also seen the entire world economy, the price of oil, the Strait of Hormuz disrupted. I think, the US and many of the countries in the region.
Disrupted by Iran. Disrupted.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think this war...
the Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz was disrupted by Iran. Iran is holding the whole world economy hostage. This is all the more reason to confront Iran. and the United States has also blocked two people,
Absolutely.
the two sides can play the same game. So it was the wrong. There is this romantic view that you read in some of the media that the Iranians are an ancient civilization that have invented chess and that weave carpets and have strategic patience and all that. This applies maybe to Iranian culture, but it doesn't apply to the gang of criminals that are the Islamic Revolution regards that hold Iran hostage itself, and the whole region.
And that's the thing. I think Iran is holding a lot of the region hostage. Yeah. We're almost out of time, so I'm just going to move into my final question for you today. Frankly, there's still so much more to discuss. But I have to wonder, finally, when you step back and you look at Lebanon, at Gaza, Syria, and really the entire wider region, how does this end? Do you think we're moving towards a new regional order or simply a much more dangerous phase of instability?
Well, it could go both ways, and the key factor is American involvement. If the United States capitulates, and this is the main worry, and if the United States, the allies of the United States still rely on American protection, and the whole relationship between America and its allies in the region is part of involves protection. So if that protection doesn't exist anymore, and Iran can still hold the whole Arab world, including the GCC, hostage. We can throw rockets at you anytime if you don't behave. That's a bit like in the days of the Soviet Union, the way they controlled Eastern Europe.
Absolutely.
Because they could drive their tanks into Prague or Budapest, and nobody could do anything about it. Yeah. So that's the bleak side. The bright side would be that we would finally have regional peace. We'd have peace in Lebanon, peace in Palestine and Israel, peace with the Gulf, and the Gulf states have an agenda of peace. I mean, they have an agenda of development and prosperity, and they cannot be transformed into a fighting society. It would go against their vision of the future.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I think we're still a very long way away from peace in the Middle East. I think there's still a lot of big questions, a lot more negotiations still to be had, and a unstable time for the region, I think, as you mentioned. But Mr. Shehadi, thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. We really appreciate your time, and we will certainly be continuing to watch these negotiations and very fragile ceasefire as it unfolds.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you.